For the third consecutive week, we've got USC versus a mystery team. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day. Live streams, call-in shows. Please lock it in with a subscription. Hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. And, of course, like the video. Matt Lowry's on the line from Conquest Chronicles to talk USC football. Matt, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Right now we're just here waiting to see if we're gonna have if USC's opponent, actually, not so much of if they'll have a game, but who their opponent will be. Right now, some good news. It's looking like Utah, but we can only keep our fingers crossed right now.
So the Pac-12 is in a situation in which, starting later than the other four conferences, wants to get in, of course, as many games as possible. There were two games missed the first 2 weeks of the season, but they were able to put together, of course, UCLA and Cal in a very short period of time. That was announced sometime on Friday, and they were on the field Sunday morning. So there's going to be some interesting game times and opponents, and also the possibility, I know both the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have talked about, if they have to play two teams again, if there has to be a rematch just to get in another game, that's also a possibility. So, of course, USC and Arizona State was an opener, so both teams hadn't been on the field. But then Arizona missed its first game, so USC got to play a first-time opponent again. And now with Utah, if the Utes are able to play on Saturday, it's again a first time for USC. But we have seen the Trojans twice. It hasn't been pretty, especially through the first 55 minutes on offense, but they got the job done in the last two drives of the game both times.
Yeah, so it was pretty much, it felt like Groundhog Day, if you catch my drift with USC these last 2 weeks, especially last week against Arizona. They started slow, struggled to move the ball. Not only that, but on defense, they struggled to contain Grant Gunnell, who was actually moving the ball with his legs, something that we haven't seen much from him last season when he filled in for Khalil Tate. But as you mentioned, USD managed to get it done in the late seconds. They were resilient. However, it does leave some concern. I know last week when we jumped on here after the Arizona game, we addressed some of those concerns, and we kind of moved them off as maybe first game jitters, or maybe, okay, they haven't practiced like that in a while, and first game, getting all the kinks out the way. But it was the same things that we that almost cost USC the game last week. There are just so many things to put together, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and they're frustrated with Graham Harreld's offense and his inability to adjust. Where honestly, I think I said this yesterday too. I think one of the factors that a lot of people have to look at is that there was no tape on Arizona for them to properly scout Arizona. Arizona had a new defensive coordinator. They brought in a new defensive coordinator, fresh QB, who honestly they only saw, I want to say, half of the Arizona game last year. They saw for one half of that game last year when they took Khalil Tate out and put Gunnell in. So, I mean, you can only go off of one half of tape from last year on top of a new defense that Arizona is running, and it's hard to scout. Arizona hasn't played a game. They remember their game was canceled last week. So a lot of moving parts that could have played a factor in the Trojans struggling. However, it was throughout the game, and it was the same struggle. So it was a lot of concern. And especially now with this coming up week with Utah on the horizon, or as we've heard, or what people are speculating, if Utah's unable to go, it could be Colorado a week early or a little bit earlier now. It's going to depend, it's some things that USC has to fix, and they have to get out the way. And again, you're going to see another team, assuming Utah is able to play, You're going to see another team who haven't played in 2 weeks, who haven't really practiced in 2 weeks either. Season opener for that team, not a lot of tape on them. So USC has to do something different here.
So, Matt, basically we've got an air raid offense under Graham Harrell, if we isolate that side of the ball here, where even though the final statistics and point totals against Arizona State and Arizona looked decent, although Arizona's had the worst defense in the Pac-12 for the past 5 years in regards to points per game given up. They had 14 points with 5 minutes left against Arizona State. USC had 20 points on the board with 5 minutes left against Arizona. Then they finally kicked it into gear the final 2 drives with touchdowns both games. The receivers are elite. The quarterback threw 30 touchdowns last year. He looks a little off. He's not throwing the ball crisply, but they did get 2 nice running games out of Carr and Stepp against Arizona. Is it play calling? Is it offensive line?
I want to say part of it is on the offensive line, and I know a lot of people are looking at what Elijah Vera Tucker's doing, as well as what Jalen McKenzie's been doing as well. But you judge the offensive line as a unit, and as a unit, they have not looked crisp at all. With the offense itself, you have to look at it as a lot of teams took time to adapt. Mind you, last year, not many teams, you see the air raid, especially in the Pac-12 South. Not a lot of teams see the air raid every year because, mind you, I think only not Arizona State, but Washington State at the time under Mike Leach was running the air raid. And so not a lot of teams see the air raid that often. And so you have USC with the amount of talent that they have, you got to prepare for that. And not a lot of teams notice, like, all right, how can we bottle up these receivers? Arizona State had the game plan, went to a traditional 4-3, went in the zone, and you saw, and as I mentioned last week, a lot of the USC receivers were doing routes as if they were playing man instead of adjusting their routes playing zone. And so we've seen USC struggle against the zone. We've seen Keaton Slovis struggle when they would drop 7 to 8 back in the coverage. And it looks like that seems to be a problem. However, now the running game is going now. Now USC is starting to get their run game going. So Graham Harrell, he wants to keep running the air raid the way it should. However, now the run game is going, and you're starting to see him kind of start embracing the run game. On top of that, you mentioned it earlier, Mark, that Keaton Slovis has not looked sharp. His throws has not looked sharp at all. Graham Harrell did a presser today and said that his mechanic, it looked like it was his mechanics are fine. There's nothing wrong. He's thinking maybe the ball slipped out of his hands, but that was the second week where we've seen, Keaton Slovis spirals don't look as sharp or as crisp. And we've been hearing in practice that he's looked sharp. So we don't know what's going on. And Keaton Slovis also ruled out that anything is wrong with his arm. So we don't know what it is other than what we see on the field is that he don't look as sharp. And we don't know if it's because of the offensive line and him being rushed. We don't know if it's coverage. We don't know if it's from that same arm from the Holiday Bowl. There's just a lot of things we don't know right now.
We don't know much about Utah either. We do know that they're probably the most stable program in the Pac-12, if not the country, with Kyle Whittingham in charge now for 16 years. And regardless of the personnel losses, which they got ravaged on defense, they had one of the best defenses, one of the best secondaries in the country last year, even though USC took advantage of it in Utah's lone Pac-12 regular season loss last year and finishing 8-1. Of course, they're going for 3 consecutive division championships. This is just a program that's almost the anti-USC in certain respects because they play above their recruiting ranking. They're so stable, so foundational, just have their system in place and work it to a T. But new quarterback, new running back, Zach Moss off to the NFL, Tyler Huntley off to the next level. Jake Bentley comes in from South Carolina, in which he threw for a ton of yards, has a ton of starts, a lot of experience under his belt in the SEC. Also turnover prone. They bring in Cameron Rising, who was a top recruit at Texas. 4 offensive linemen come back. So we know some personnel. Britain Covey caught 60 balls a couple of years ago. He's back. But at the same time, as you mentioned, Matt, not anything on tape since the Alamo Bowl, and a lot of those players are gone.
Yeah, so with Utah, and this goes back to what I've mentioned earlier about lack of tape and everything. Utah is replacing a lot of players from last year's team. Mind you, this was that last year's team played USC in the Coliseum and got beat by USC with Matt Fink coming in for Keaton Slovis after he got injured. However, this is going to be different with this game. And the reason why I say this is different is because USC have not won at Utah. They have not won at Salt Lake City since 2012. Yeah, since 2012. So that's something to think about right there. It's been that long since they've won. So it's something about Utah that USC can't seem to get over. On top of that, this is expected to be this is predicted, I believe, to be the coldest game for USC in years. So it's going to be really cold. Mind you, I want to say 2 years ago, USC played Utah about the same time. Matter of fact, that was October. Excuse me. I take that back. So it's going to be interesting. I'll put it like this. It's going to be very cold in Utah. There's going to be no fans in there, so that might take that element out where it's been loud and everything in Utah for the past few years. So that element is gone. The home field advantage is pretty much gone. For USC, however, we don't know what tape. We don't know what they don't know what Utah looks like. They don't know what guys to look after, to look for, things like that, tendencies, everything. However, they do have an advantage because they're 2 games in, where Utah is coming into their first game and they have not really practiced that much. We don't know how many scholarship players, because the last few weeks Utah's been lacking scholarship players to play. So we don't know how many scholarship players will play. We don't know how many is going to be healthy to play. We just know they're getting healthy enough to play. So that's the thing that we're all looking for and we're waiting for. Utah is also replacing a lot of people on defense too. A lot of people got to remember the last 2 years, Utah had one of the best defenses in the Pac-12. However, this season they're replacing everybody. They're replacing just about everybody on that defense. So it's going to be a huge figuring out. It's going to be a huge figuring out fest for Utah, and that could play in the USC's hand.
Utah always a factor at home, especially. They have won the division 2 consecutive years. USC looks like the best team on paper. Utah is a bit of a mystery, but again, we expect Jake Bentley at quarterback from South Carolina, in which he got a ton of starts since his freshman season in Columbia, South Carolina. Utah and USC, hopefully they can get on the field. It's a late kick, 8:30 local time for an ESPN 11:30 slot. So USC turns around from a 9 a.m. 2 weeks ago local to a late game, Matt. And that doesn't help. But again, that's one of the more difficult places to play, as you just mentioned, when there are fans in the stands, because they are loud. And if it's cold, it's just not a good scene for USC. As you mentioned, 3 consecutive losses on the road, but at least won't have to deal with the fans.
They won't. And, me personally being to Utah for a game before, it is crazy loud over there. It's something that you can't describe, where everybody's on top of you. it's super loud, and especially if it's the right time of the year, everybody's energetic. Like everyone's energetic regardless. So it's one of the great places to see a football game and to be there. One of the great atmospheres to be there. But it's going to be different without fans there. That plays a factor for USC. And as you mentioned, this time it's a late kickoff start. So USC now gone from playing at 9 o'clock in the morning local time to 12:30 local time to the latest game possible that they could put on the slide. But again, it all depends if Utah is able to go. If Utah is unable to go, I keep an eye on Colorado, who was slated to play Arizona State this week. However, Arizona State is dealing with COVID-19 cases on their team. So now Colorado's left without an opponent. If Utah is unable to play, I wouldn't be shocked to see the Pac-12 go, okay, we're going to move up USC and Colorado. They play each other on the 21st. That's going to be the game right there. And then they'll reschedule USC Utah maybe when they play Colorado or at a different time. That's probably what I would guess. The reason why they were able to do Cal and UCLA outside of the two teams were open. Cal, Northern California, 6-hour trip or 1-hour plane flight if you do a plane, 6-hour drive if you're driving. And UCLA being in Pasadena, being in Southern California. So it was a lot easier to do. How they would figure this out, probably Colorado will go to the Coliseum, play USC early, maybe make it a 9 a.m. game, or maybe make it a late game, but out of the way it looks, it's going to be USC Utah, barring that anything happens with the two teams. But we always got to keep our fingers crossed in these crazy times.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down USC. The Trojans escaped by the two Arizona teams 28-27 with 2 touchdowns in the last 5 minutes. Do the same in the last 5 minutes with 2 touchdown drives late at Arizona. They go to Utah Saturday night if that game comes off as scheduled, but the Utes have yet to play this season. We got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles. So USC at 2-0, less than impressive, probably play the next best team on its schedule, at least on paper and based on what we know of Utah football from year to year this week until a Pac-12 championship game, if that's what is Utah's or USC's destiny. To reach its goals, who would you name as an X factor on offense, X factor on defense, Matt?
Well, for USC to reach their goals on offense, it's going to have to be Keaton Slovis on offense. The reason why I named Slovis as the X factor, because I would go Graham Harrell, but that's a whole different discussion. But with Slovis, he has to look like Slovis from last year. He has, a lot of people are adjusting to him. A lot of people have figured him out now that they had a full time to look at tape and to watch him. And so now Slovis has to take his game to another level to help this team get over the bridge. Because if he, the numbers are saying one thing. He's putting up incredible numbers. However, on film, he doesn't look as solid or as sharp. Again, I've mentioned his throws don't look as crisp as they did last year. We don't know if that's due to from the injury that he had at the Holiday Bowl. We don't know what that's due to. But, they said nothing's wrong. He has to take command of the offense. He has to do what he has to help get this offense going in order for it to work. Because once he gets going, then it's really there's no stopping USC's offense. That's bottom line. Play calling could be, play calling, anything. They still have to execute. And for him and if he starts executing as sharply as he did last year, USC can get to where they need to get to. On defense, Drake Jackson is going to be the huge X factor. And the reason why I say that is because everything starts with the USC pass rush. A lot of teams, we're in this era where a lot of teams are starting to pass a lot more. So if USC, if Drake Jackson can continue to get pressure, if he can continue to get into the backfield, and oh, by the way, he's shown that he can play in coverage too. So if he can continue to do everything what he has to do on his end, USC's defense will function a lot better. Now they need to patch up the 3rd and long situations where where teams are converting on 3rd and 15 or 3rd and forever. But so far, he's doing his job, which is opening up for Connor Murphy, another name to look out for as well, and Nick Figueroa. It's opening up for those two guys to also get into the backfield and get work in. So he's the stalwart of that USC pass rush, of that USC defense. I mean, we could talk about Talanoa Hufanga, all day long, staying healthy, but Drake Jackson is that guy that USC really needs, and he's that X factor that can make a difference on the USC defense, a huge difference.
Just like it says on the banner there, share the videos on social media, let people know that we're here talking college football every day, and please subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We go live every day. Hit the bell for the notifications. Check out Matt's work at SB Nation's Conquest Chronicles as well. USC and Utah, probably USC against somebody, most likely. We shall see. The Pac-12 is going to do whatever it needs to do to get as many games on the field as possible. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by.
I appreciate being on. Thank you.